Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey everyone, this is episode 361 of The Team House. I'm Jack here with Dave, and our guest on tonight's show is William Evanina. He served as a FBI agent, starting off his career working organized crime cases, robberies, was on the SWAT team. 9/11 happens, got involved in all types of investigations, and then he went and served on the joint FBI-CIA Counterespionage Task Force, going after people who are spying on the United States. All kinds of different stuff there with Snowden and Jerry Lee. We'll get into that in a bit. And then he went on to head up the Office of National Counterintelligence, which transitioned into the National Counterintelligence Security Center. And today he is running his own company, the Evanina Group. So we're going to get into all of this. But Bill, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you coming on the show. And let's kick it off by, tell us a little bit about, your upbringing and how that took you eventually towards governmental service.
Well, first of all, very humbled to be here, man. It's exciting. Very familiar with the podcast. I watched a lot of them. I'm excited to be here and add a little value to what you do already with the great Patriots. So it's exciting. Looking forward to it.
Thank you.
So I'm a kid from Scranton, Pennsylvania, a little bit north of Scranton, PA. Grew up there. Mom and dad. So I was the first kid in my family to graduate high school. So never mind college, but high school. Typical broken family story. I played a lot of sports in high school. Played baseball and football, little wrestling, and went college. Played baseball in college for my 4 years there. So I was an athlete, and then basically I was going to go to the Navy and be a JAG. That was my plan. And then I got offered this presidential internship with the federal government. I'm like a senior in college, and I'm like, what is this about? Oh, it was a GS7, 8, 9 thing. And I'm like, how much money is that? Well, it's $15,000 a year. And I'm like, well, that's $15,000 more than my mom ever made. So I'm in. So I joined the government. I was assigned to an agency called the General Services Administration, where I got put in a 1-year training program. I got kicked out into the what's called the Public Building Service. So I ended up being a project manager for building federal buildings and courthouses. Part of that process, I probably built 4 or 5 FBI buildings. So I got to work closely with the FBI, which ironically was my dream to be an FBI agent my whole life since I was 12 years old. So I ended up applying, and I got in the FBI when I was 29 years old. And I went to Quantico, which was an amazing 20 weeks there. And my first office assignment was Newark, New Jersey. So growing up in Northeast Pennsylvania, a blue-collar family for sure. My dad was a machinist. I had a polka band, right? So we're a very eclectic neighborhood. My brother's an Orthodox priest. My sister's an FBI agent. We're really, really weird families, successful, coming out of the crazy Northeast Pennsylvania. So we're very proud to be up from that area.
And so what year was it that you graduate from the academy and get assigned to New Jersey, Newark?
Yep. So I went into the academy in the summer of 96. So I graduated in February-ish, 97, and went right to New Jersey right at that point. And
you first started off on organized crime?
Yeah. My first assignment was the Organized Crime Squad, which was plenty of it going on there in New Jersey. Well, I was assigned to multiple cases which involved the Bonanos, the Lucchese, and Genovese crime family. One of them, I ended up working a really good case on the Bruno Scarfo family out of Philly, their faction that was up in New Jersey. We had a confidential witness, made a lot of tapes, worked hard, listened to those tapes. We took it to the U.S. Attorney's Office. We got an indictment, RICO indictment. We indicted like seven mafia guys, guys like Joseph Scoops Licata and Nicky O. Oliveri and Fat Lou Fazzini, all the typical names. So that was my first big case, my first bunch of arrests of mob guys in New Jersey on a RICO case. They all end up pleading guilty. The funny thing about the Bureau, which makes it awesome, is so we worked really hard on this. got them to plead guilty. They all got nice sentences. I go on vacation, and I come home, and I was transferred to a violent crime squad. I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm a mafia agent. You can't just transfer me to violent crimes. I don't even like violent crimes, right? So I went there kicking and screaming until the first day. And day 2, I was kind of like, I can't believe I haven't been doing this the whole time, right? So the first time you find somebody, whether it be a fugitive or my first case was an armored car robbery, $800,000, bank robberies, kidnappings, kicking doors down 3 o'clock in the morning. And until you actually do it, you have no idea how awesome that is.
What are you kind of learning about, both law enforcement, but also criminality during this time frame? I mean, it sounds like you're dealing with white collar crime, but also some pretty violent folks that are doing, knocking off banks and things.
Yeah. So I think looking back at that, juxtaposing those maybe 3 or 4 years of work there, I think the fundamental line that goes through that is evidence, techniques, and capabilities of your team, right? So my violent crime task force was agents, county detectives, city detectives in Newark, like people who've been on the street a long time, right? So, but the goal is to get the evidence. And for us, what you learn real quick is you're training in Quantico, you're training on the street. Once you get people in a room, you own them, right? And we're really good at, well-trained at doing really good interviews, good cop, bad cop. I was fascinated by that. I was always the good cop. I didn't have it in me to be the bad cop. But that dynamics worked very well. For me, personally, guys, I'll tell you the hard part for me was with the La Cosa Nostra guys, you could just walk up to them at a cafe and start shooting the shit and say, hey, not for nothing, but we're going to come arrest you on Saturday. Just have your shit in order. And they'd be, oh, thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. It's just business, and they would be ready to go. When I got to the violent crime folks, completely different, right? Because they were strapping. I mean, I think in 1999 to 2000, we took about 190 guns off the street. So it's a different world. Those guys, it's not business, right? It's life or death for them. And back in the day, at that time, what we would do is we would take cases that the state had that were 2-time felons. Because back then we had what was called trigger lock violations. So if you got them with a gun the third time, it was minimum mandatory 25 years in prison. So those are the big cases we would go to get. And then we looked at every case. Bank robbery crews, we look at them as RICOs. Those are big gang cases. It was gangs that were doing violent crime at the time, right? So whether it be black gangs, the Puerto Rican gangs, we had a lot of Dominican gangs, or it was like the Muslim Brotherhood. It make a difference. 2 or more people, they were a gang, so you automatically could charge them with conspiracy.
Interesting. And Newark is a gamey place to this day.
Oh, it's the best food in the East Coast no one knows about, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend anybody going there unless you're strapped or you know how to handle carjacking. It's pretty rough. It's a pretty rough area. The suburbs are getting pretty bad as well.
I went to a concert there maybe like 4 weeks ago. Second, we got off the train at the train station there. Guy doing the clucking chicken on the sidewalk, puke all over himself. Cop standing there writing him a ticket. I'm like, oh my God, where am I?
Yeah. So, and I'll tell you a weird part about being on a task force for me, whether it be violent crimes or fugitives or bank robberies, you're sitting next to Newark cops or sitting next to the Essex County detectives or whatever. And then, but what they don't know is from your friends that are working public corruption, maybe their police chief is under investigation or the mayor's under investigation or one of their buddies are on investigation. So it's really complex scenario, right? It's really, really difficult to be in that space. And you really have to be able to facilitate your own inner dynamics of politics pretty well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And is this how you started getting involved in the FBI SWAT team because you were doing these violent cases and you wanted to increase those capabilities?
Exactly. So when I got transferred from the mafia squad to the violent crime squad, I'm going to say 90% of the guys there on the SWAT team, right? So they're like, "Hey, you're going to train for a year and you're going to travel for the team." And I'm like, I don't think I'm a SWAT guy. I'm a decent shot, but So the guys around me, they took me under the wing. We trained hard. I tried out in January. It was like 7 degrees. I did really well. I end up making the team, which was phenomenal. And they immediately sent me to a sniper school. So, which I fell in love with that aspect of being an operator, right? So not only was an operator, but I was also, a sniper. And I thought I loved the tactitional part of that. I loved the craft of being a sniper, building hides and most of the FBI sniper work is surveillance work, right? It's basically get into a position and take pictures and watch stuff. And we'll talk about that later on Anthrax if you want. But yeah, I loved it. And I thought, wow. And you don't know you're going to like something until you actually get a chance to do it, right? And then being at sniper school and advanced sniper schools, and you're training with some of the best shooters in the world who've come from real work, whether it be Delta or SEALs or, the Israelis, you're like people that have really done this for a living. So what am I doing here, right? So it just makes you a better at working harder and understanding the craft, whether it be on the rifle or off the rifle. And I was fascinated by that. I really enjoyed it. But I did know, guys, I'll tell you that I did know early on, maybe about 2-3 years in, that I thought I could be a better leader of these men than I was an actual man on the team, right? So down the road, 2014, a little later, I ended up getting promoted to my first supervisory job, and it allowed me, I was in charge of the Joint Terrorism Task Force threat squad there. So, but I also became the supervisor of the SWAT team. So, which was really, really fun, to be the on-scene commander for operations. And as you know, in Newark, you mentioned it, we were a very busy SWAT team. From when I got on the team in 98 we were very busy, probably 5-6 jobs a month, which is a lot.
Yeah. So for people who may not know, what is the difference between the roles that HRT has and then a regional SWAT team has?
Yep. Great question. So every FBI office has a SWAT team, right? They have 12 to 30 dudes on their team, depending on the size. Newark's probably got 30. Washington Field's probably got 40, 50. New York's probably got 40 or 50. Every office has those. HRT is located in Quantico, Virginia. Those are the special operators. They do this full time. So if you're like me, I was a SWAT agent in New Jersey, or you're in California, it's a part-time job. You still have cases and investigations to work, right? So you got to do both. So you got to do 4 to 5 training days a month on top of all your cases and your informants and it's a lot. A lot of those individuals who are on those teams get recruited to go try out for HRT. So and a lot of the guys on my team, or whether you're in San Francisco or Houston, maybe you're former Delta, you're former Green Beret or SEALs, those guys are pretty apt at being able to go down and do that training, right? So I think that's where it gets. And then over time, I think in 2009, they got smart. They said, hey, listen, we're going to make a special track in the FBI so that you don't have to spend all your years doing investigations if you come from a special forces career. So now they said, if you come from one of the special forces, you can go right into a SWAT program, or you could go right to HRT and try out if you want.
Those
are the guys actually also that come to like Jersey or go to Houston and do training on, tubular targets or CQB or, advanced sniper training, big operations. We would try tabletop exercises. They would run that. But if we have, after a bunch of school shootings, we have new TTPs that come into play, HRT would develop those new tactics. They would bring them to the field. They would train us on a new way to hit a hallway in a school or a new way to do a stairwell in a school. And then we would learn that, and then we would take that and we would train the state police and the local police departments.
Yeah. And then does having that kind of background, does that give you like some bona fides when you go kind of to a more like a lower speed job? You know what I mean? Or people like, oh, he was in SWAT. Like, listen to him. He knows what he's talking about.
Without a doubt. I mean, not only, within the FBI, everyone knows what it is. But when I went over to the CIA to be the chief of their counter-espionage program, there was a lot of like, whoa, tell us about your SWAT days, right? Because they don't know. They don't know what they see on TV.
Right.
But what really manifests itself is like when you're out in public, right, and you're doing speeches or you're talking to CEOs or business people, and you want to talk about China and intellectual property theft, they want to talk about what was it like to be a sniper on the SWAT team, right?
Right.
So yes, I mean, really over beers and cocktails with people who make, multi-billionaires and people who run hedge funds, they want to talk about your first SWAT arrest, right?
Right.
What happened? What's it like, kicking a door down? Do you ever have a mistake with a flashbang? All that. They want to know all those things, which is really good for business. But also, it's really cool for me to be able to talk about things I like to talk about with someone who has no idea other than what they see in the movies.
Sure.
So I want to take a minute today to tell you guys about the Perfect Jean. I've been wearing them for a few weeks now and really enjoy them, and I just want to share it with our audience. Sometimes jeans have this problem where, you guys all have seen these skinny jeans that they like crush your balls and, it's just not comfortable to wear. Or the other way around, jeans are like too baggy. You have this sort of like diaper in your ass area, it looks like. So there are these problems that, different fits of different types of jeans have. And the Perfect Jean strives to fix that. Both the fit, but also the mobility, the maneuverability. It has a stretchy fabric. Like they say it's like yoga ready, but I would say it's athletics ready. Moving furniture, doing things around the house. You're not going to have that like super tight, like constricted fit that you feel like you're not going to be able to move around in. And there are over 400,000 people out there wearing these jeans at this point, so not all of them can be wrong. I hope you guys will go and check them out. So a few scenarios where you can wear these jeans and where they really come together. Everything from, doing yard work or doing things around your house. If you have to move furniture around or you have to do handiwork, they're perfectly comfortable. But you can wear them, getting your man spread on the subway, if that's your thing. So the Perfect Jean is great for all kinds of different environments, whether it's doing handiwork around the house or on the job or athletics. And we really hope you guys will go and check them out. For a limited time, our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectjean.nyc or Google The Perfect Jean and use the code HOUSE15 for 15% off. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code HOUSE15. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. So fuck your khakis and get the Perfect Jean. So you're going through your career. Sounds like you're having a hell of a good time at this point. But now we're getting into the late 1990s, early 2000s. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience was like sort of in the run up to 9/11 and then that day?
Absolutely. So 9/11, so the morning of Tuesday, September 11th, we had a SWAT job. So we were out 3:30 in the morning till 5:30. We had a big arrest, about 10 or 12 gang members. We came back, we cleaned up, we do what we do always. We go to a great diner in Jersey. We have breakfast at the diner. We come back all stuffed and ready for naps. We get back and walk in the office. We're not even back in the office, probably 20 minutes, where I see 20, 30 agents and analysts huddled around this little 13-inch TV in the corner of the office, maybe 50 feet away. I'm like, who knows what's going on there? You just don't pay attention. And then you hear people yelling and screaming and running around. I'm like, what's going on? So then you start working your way over there. And literally, it's probably a 17-inch tubular TV back in 2001. And then you see the World Trade Center burning, right? It's crazy. And then you have some people looking out the window going on our building roof. We're on the 21st floor in Newark, and people are going on the roof to see the smoke over there. Like, what's going on? One of my SWAT guys, Karl, was a pilot, and he's like, that's not a Cessna. There's no way. Look at this hole in that building. And lo and behold, second plane hits. So you're talking about pre-10 o'clock in the morning. We have two planes hit. Now, mind you, to put this a little layer here, we don't have cell phones, right? So FBI agents at the time, you have a pager, you get a page, you got to go find a payphone and call somebody. So that's where we are in the world of FBI. So we're like, okay, crap. By 11 o'clock in the morning, maybe 11:05, we had the manifests from all the planes. So those manifests came in, and we obviously had a plethora of Middle Eastern males sitting in first class. At the time, we identified 13, maybe 14 of them by noon that were living in New Jersey. So it was an oh shit moment for us at a minimum. So we decided to split up in teams. State police came in by probably 4 o'clock in the afternoon. At that time, we didn't have a special agent in charge, and we didn't have an assistant special agent in charge. They had left, so we were a lot of acting dudes and dudettes and some did really well, some went into fetal position. It depended. So we decided who we're going to send over to New York into the pit. to help, and then who was going to start working these cases. I got assigned to Zayed Jarrar, who was the pilot of Flight 93, and we started dealing with that issue like right then. And then you probably know this story already, but then that night we had, the urban mover guys driving around Jersey taking pictures, and turned out to be a bunch of Israeli guys. So it was really crazy first 24 hours of 9/11 for sure. And then to me, we didn't go home. So on Wednesday, it's a brand new day. And the weird part of this whole thing was Tuesday the 11th. Again, we lived in it's called the Gateway Building, a tall building in Newark. On Tuesday 11th was the first day of the building of a new construction for an FBI building in Newark, 2 blocks away. So we were starting that process, a hole in the ground. So we had to secure that site. It was a lot of chaos on 9/11, New Jersey, to say the least.
And how did your part kind of evolve on Flight 93 as the days go on?
So it's funny. So I was assigned as what's called a lead agent, an individual, one of the agents that sit around and get all the incoming leads, and then you assign them to other folks. What happened tangentially, we're still working SWAT stuff, right? So we're still jumping out and grabbing people and doing search warrants everywhere. So you're doing that. At the time, we really didn't have what's called a public affairs officer. So I got sucked into doing a lot of public affairs. So if you go back in the media in 2001 and 2, you're going to see me on TV a lot because they didn't really have anybody who could do it or who wanted to do it. So for me personally, I was involved in those 3 things around the clock. I eventually dropped off as a lead agent, but my squad that I was on was assigned Flight 93. So I stayed with that probably for the next 3 years. And then Flight 93 we ended up prosecuting Zacharias Moussaoui as a 20th hijacker, right? So that all came out of our Newark office. My good buddy and partner, Ray Gadetti from the state police, was the case agent. So a cool thing about this, if you talk about it or not, so this is September of 01. Then shortly thereafter, in October, we have anthrax.
Yes.
And the mailbox it was mailed by was in Princeton, New Jersey, which is about 3 miles from where I lived. So the fun thing on that is I get to be a sniper, build my hides, hiding in bushes, taking photographs of every single human being that went to that post office. Let me just tell you, that's a long 12-hour shift. That's a long 12-hour shift. And then we had, a month later, the kidnapping of Daniel Pearl, who was the Wall Street Journal reporter, and who would have known at the time that he was kidnapped and then sold to Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. It's a small world. So in New Jersey, we had a lot going on at the same time.
Yeah, geez. So the anthrax thing, which is like one of these sort of enduring mysteries. I know they think they know who did it. Guy who has passed away since then. What do you recall from that investigation and kind of what came out of it?
Yeah, I recall being scared. Like I remember, we had 2 things going on, 2 different types of people at the time. So you're not the fall of 01. We still think it's Middle Eastern males doing anthrax. Like I mean, it's hard to have revisionist history here, but so we're thinking, okay, they crashed planes in the buildings. Now they're poisoning people with anthrax. What's next? So there was a big spiel, I'd say, from maybe November of 01 to May of 02. We thought they were taking hazmat trucks and they were going to drive them in the buildings. We had all these things going on at the same time. But for me, the stress was being assigned to that mailbox, right? So they identified the mailbox on Nassau Street in Princeton as the place where these letters were mailed, right? So that was, you want to talk about 24/7 unbelievable technical and human coverage on that. It was pretty impressive. So everybody, the first 5 people that I took pictures of covertly going to the mailbox, I think the first 3 had gloves on. So we're like, what are you wearing gloves for? Go arrest those people, right? Turned out to be, like they are today, crazy people wearing gloves, right? So I just remember that first probably 4 or 5 months just being scared of everything and scared of the unknown of what's next. And then what the cool part was that really helped, honestly, the investigations. At the time, this would have been probably late October, 2 dudes come in our office with these 2 huge boxes. Open up these boxes. There's all these really cool Star Trek flip phones. Boom. It's like, this is really cool. So everybody got a flip phone. Everybody got a phone number, and you're able to press these letters that for automatic answers. It was a company called Nextel at the time, right? And they had this new thing. They wanted us to try them out for free, which we did. And the ability to be out in surveillance and be able to text folks the way, not that we do now, but the way back then, hey, who has eyes? I do, right? And you press, you got to know. To me, that was, for us, it was the most technological advancement probably since the typewriter, for FBI agents, that we could have a cell phone and call people. But more important, the last thing the coolest part of the Nextel was the push to talk feature, right? So
like
we didn't have to do FBI radios. We could push to talk. Hey, Bill, Mark, where are you at? I see him. I don't see him, right? Hey, I'll meet you at the diner. That kind of stuff it was earth shattering. So in New Jersey, we ended up getting about 400 or 500 of them, and I think New York got about 1,000 of them.
And was that kind of like the end of your part of the anthrax investigation, the surveillance portion?
No, I ended up, so after surveillance, I'll say probably early part of 2011, they created an anthrax task force in D.C. Some of the New York agents, New Jersey agents were in Trenton. They went downtown. My work on that case ended up being more on the public affairs side. So I ended up not being part of the actual investigation, probably early part of 2002.
Do you have an opinion about who was behind that and what their motivations may have been?
Yeah, I think the last guy that's now dead was the guy. I think that the Bureau screwed up a lot early on. I think very similar to Richard Jewell, you get locked in with intelligence bias and you get locked in that this has to be the guy. I think the Bureau made those mistakes, but fortunately that the last individual, his name escapes me now, I think he was the guy. The evidence on the molecular part of the anthrax is too strong to really negate that. And he was the only one to be able to have that access to it. I think I'm good. Listen, there's a lot of things that aren't solved. I'm pretty confident he was the guy on that.
Yeah, he was like a lab doctor or something like that worked with that
and stuff. And he was the guy who was very cavalier about it. He was hey, I know, he was trying to turn other people in, and he thought he could overplay the agents. I think early on we had the wrong agents on the case. We had the wrong agents doing interviews, right? It's really easy to do. There's cases like that everywhere where initially it goes awry, but then we do get locked in on intelligence bias. At the end of the day, I've always said, let the evidence follow where it goes, but you got to have evidence.
And then, your experience on the Danny Pearl kidnapping, as you point out, he was a Wall Street Journal journalist who was killed by KSM, from what we learned later.
Yeah, so my squad, the Violent Crime Squad, we had a lot of senior agents that were really, really good. And I look back at it, the way I talked about it is like, you always have in your wallet, if your son is kidnapped, your daughter's kidnapped, who do you want your wife to call, right? And those 3 agents, 4 agents, all those agents in my office were on that squad, right? So one of really my good friends, John Mulligan, ended up getting sent over to Pakistan to be the lead agent from our office, and we supported him from multiple aspects of that, working with his attorney's office and doing all kinds of work with the CIA and DIA out of the Newark office on our squad. And John ended up being the guy who actually ended up getting the videotape of Daniel Pearl being beheaded and was the first guy to watch it. And, John sat literally next to me in my cubicle. So those were really trying times as well. Again, the mullahs, we didn't really know who was who, right? And then, as you know, it took a while to recognize that tattoo from the beheading and making that connection to KSM down the road.
And then I think you worked an early counterintelligence case in Jersey. Was that during this time frame or was that later?
Yeah. Oh, boy, that's a good point of that. So 2004, I get my first supervisory job in the Joint Terrorism Task Force in Jersey, which was phenomenal, right? And doing really good work, and then also chasing down every suspicious bin Laden on the New Jersey Turnpike. But in 2005, we had this case that came out of nowhere. So I'm now acting assistant special agent in charge, right? So I'm like number 2. We're waiting for the new guy or gal to get assigned. Who knows when that's going to be? We get a call from our office down in Red Bank that says, hey, we got a really suspicious one here. We got a guy who's taking top secret classified data out of the high side and he's putting it in the low side and he's changing it in his name and he's sending it to somewhere in the Philippines. I'm like, what? So they did a little work on this, ends up being, a captain, retired captain in the Marine Corps. His name is Leandro Aragoncillo. He was an analyst, a child porn analyst for the FBI. What's he doing looking up terrorism stuff and Chinese stuff, right? And he shouldn't be doing that. Turns out, long story short, he was taking stuff and sending it to Senator Laxton in the Philippines. They were trying to overturn the government. They were trying to do a coup. So they were working with Abu Sayyaf and a bunch of other things. The Marcos family had been removed. They're trying to get the Marcos family back in. So he was doing it out of ideology for the most part. Well, once we realized, oh my goodness, previously before coming to the FBI, he was the pre-briefer for Vice President Cheney at the White House. So he had access to unbelievable top secret classified information. So we have an investigation on him for like 3 or 4 weeks. We're following him around. We're watching him move really, really complicated stuff from the high side to the low side, because back then you were able to do that and send it over there. And then the gig was up. We issued a subpoena to his bank for bank records. And unbeknownst to me, the bank manager was friends with his wife. Mm-hmm. So she calls up his wife and says, "Hey, is your husband doing anything crazy? Why will the FBI be looking at his records?" 5 minutes later, she calls him. He starts putting stuff together. He bolts out of the office, and then we have a high-speed chase. We arrest him. He ends up pleading guilty and spends 10 years in jail as being a spy for the Philippines.
Wow.
Just out of curiosity, how did these coup plotters think they were going to be able to use American intelligence information to sort of like plan their coup or kind of position themselves in the Philippines?
That's a great question. So I got to be careful. Some of this is on the classified side. But let me just say there were other countries involved helping the Philippines try and facilitate the coup, right? And some of that was, hey, get us information on this stuff and we'll help you kind of stuff. Right?
Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay. Got
Nothing
it.
is always as it seems, right?
Yeah. There's another player in the game.
There's always another player. I mean, everybody talks about, Cuban intelligence, Anna Montes. Well, you don't think Cuba gives everything they got to the Russians? I mean,
Right.
It's really a Russian. They're like a subcontractor for the Russians.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So the next stop for you, you go over to Counterespionage, a joint FBI-CIA endeavor. For people who don't know, can you tell them what that task force is?
I will, but first, a couple big parts here I enjoyed in my life.
Yeah, please.
I don't want to skip over. So I'm fat, dumb, and happy in New Jersey. I'm running my own office in Trenton, New Jersey. I got about 30 agents there. We're doing great stuff. And then there's this new policy. Director Mullis says 5 years up and out. You got to go if you want to be a supervisor. So I got sent down to headquarters. Now I am in charge of everything in New Jersey, right? Except counterintelligence. It's a different squad. I get a job in headquarters in the Russian counterintelligence program. It's kind of a little weird. So unbeknownst to me, I get down there. The reason I got sent down there, because we were getting ready to arrest 10 Russian illegals who were working here in the United States and exfiltrate a source out of Moscow. So I spent the next year planning that, working with the CIA, planning a lot of the counterintelligence folks who had worked this for 10 years had never arrested anybody. They didn't even know where their handcuffs were, right? So we had to find a way. How are we going to arrest these 10, 12 people in America systematically on the same day without anybody knowing about it, and then at the same time get the source out, all that stuff. So I spent, a year planning for that, which was really cool. Then I ended up getting an ASAC job, which we call him Assistant Special Agent in Charge, in our Washington field office from that. We arrested all those guys. I became the counterintelligence ASAC in Washington Field, so which was awesome. We did that for about a year and a half, and then I got moved over to be the counterterrorism ASAC in Washington Field office. So I had the Joint Terrorism Task Force, SWAT, HRT, and the Threat Squad, and then we had the Navy Yard shooting under my command there in DC. Yeah, so that was Aaron Alexis. That was pretty gruesome, and being on scene there was kind of crazy. And then from there is when I went to the CIA to be chief of their counterespionage program, which was my first senior executive service job.
Hey guys, our show is sponsored by GhostBed. Check them out, please. They make awesome mattresses, awesome pillows, awesome bedding. GhostBed provides high quality and super comfortable award-winning mattresses crafted in the US and Canada. Did you know that 60% of US adults report being too hot when they're trying to sleep? That's me. I'm a sweaty little baby. That's why we designed all of our products with cooling features so you stay comfortable and asleep all night long. Pair any of our mattresses with GhostBed's award-winning adjustable base and get the ultimate sleep experience. GhostBed rules the family-owned business, 60,000 plus 5-star reviews. They have sleep experts on staff with 20 plus years of experience. So if you have any questions, you can hit them up and ask them, maybe what kind of mattresses work for you. 20 plus year warranty. That's 2 times the industry standard. Free shipping and returns on mattresses. Most of the products ship out within 24 hours. They have in-house customer support and sleep experts chilling in Plantation, Florida. It rules. It's the best. They give you 101 nights risk-free to make sure that these beds are right for you. If you don't like it after 101 nights, you can send it back, full refund. When you purchase a GhostBed mattress, your comfort guaranteed. I'm reading it right now, and it's capital letters, guaranteed. Okay? They do the right thing, and they're a great company. If you're not sure which GhostBed's right for you, like I said before, you could take their mattress quiz online, or you can give a call to one of their sleep experts, and they'll help you with exactly what you possibly could need, what works for you and what doesn't. And the best news about this is, Team House listeners and viewers, you get an extra 10% off site-wide for a limited time. You just go to ghostbed.com/house and use the code HOUSE at checkout. One more time, that's ghostbed.com/house with the code HOUSE, HOUSE, at checkout for an extra 10% off site-wide. I want to thank GhostBed for their continued support. I want to thank all the fans that listen and watch for their continued support. Without you guys, we are nothing. So thank you for supporting the show, and thank you for supporting the companies that help support the show. ghostbed.com/house for 10% off. Made in the US, made in Canada. Shout out to our brothers in Canada. They rock. Check them out. I love GhostBed. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, the spy network that you guys broke up, was that the Anna Chapman ring?
It was very much so. So
she stands out in my mind. Sorry.
I wonder why. Right, I'm just curious how that would work for us red-blooded Americans. Why that would, it's just, and so for me, being able to be part of that and be exposed to not only the awesomeness of what we can do as a federal government and monitor a spy network for 10 years. The steganography, breaking the steganography, the coding, like just
their tradecraft that they used.
Tradecraft, right? And Anna Chapman had a recruited, at the time, Susan Rice's secretary at the UN, right? So they were getting close, right? They were doing good things. So for me, it was my first big holy cow moment. This is how big this is, right? I had come from New Jersey, very myopic space. Now I'm in headquarters and I'm like, wow, we have these people all over the country. These are illegals. Like, what are they doing, right? So for me, it was an eye-opening experience, and I ended up falling in love with espionage and spy world and the evilness of Russia and China at the time, which for me was, yes, terrorism's always going to be there, but I had not been part of this ecosystem of badness of other countries and their intelligence services.
And another thing you mentioned that I think sounds really interesting is, if I understand correctly, you're saying the CIA had to exfiltrate their source about this spy ring because once you guys moved in and arrested them, the source would be compromised. And is that what was going on there?
That's kind of what's going on, right?
Okay.
I don't want to get too deep into this, but that had to happen first before we arrested anybody, right? And the cool thing about this is, at the time, Medvedev was the president of Russia. Putin was running this operation. This was his baby. Like, he was in the spy world. He had taken some time off. He took a sabbatical, and then Medvedev was running the show. So when we went, the Bureau and the CIA went to brief, the President Obama and Hillary and everybody else, was the late part of that week. We were going to make this arrest on Saturday, Sunday. And I remember our director coming back from the White House and, just telling us that, hey, Obama was excited about this. So was Hillary. Hillary hated Putin at the time. But Medvedev was in D.C., right? So we had to wait till he was wheels up Saturday night before we could start this process. So it was a lot of drama going on. And then we arrested him, obviously. And then they had their initial appearances all over the country, which is really cool. And then globally, we really embarrassed Putin. Really embarrassed him, and he's still pissed about this, obviously. And then, we had a spy SWAT in Vienna, which was really cool. And then, obviously, we had the Americans, which is even cooler. A good TV show.
So then, tell us about the counter-espionage task force.
Yeah. So by legislation, subsequent to Ames and Hansen, the two big spies, Congress said CIA's counter-espionage program shall be led by an FBI senior, right? So that has always been the case. So the senior who was there had recently left, subsequent to the arrest of General Petraeus as the CIA director, and she had left and went to be an SAC out in California. So they put me over there to do this, and which was just freaking amazing. Like, here I am, an FBI number 2 in Washington, D.C., and I'm going over to be number 1 in charge of hundreds of people in the CIA tracking down American spies around the world. And my deputy at the time, a guy named Mike Berry, was just phenomenal. And he ended up being chief of station in Kabul twice, and he ended up being head of intelligence at NSC, good guy. And we just clicked immediately and just doing amazing things. And for me, being in charge of that many people from different culture was probably my first time in my life I had actually learned how to lead, like to actually be a leader of people who weren't familiar with your culture and the FBI way. So it was really exciting to learn, but it was also very difficult to learn because you had to build trust of how you do things, and they're in a much more secretive world than the FBI was at the time. So in the long-term cases, I found it fascinating, and I loved not being under the proverbial thumb of the Department of Justice and be able to do things the CIA way. It was pretty fascinating.
As I understand it, correct me if I'm off base here, counter-espionage is sort of like a subset of counterintelligence. Like, counterintelligence can encompass like deception campaigns and things like that were confusing the opposition. But counter-espionage is like you're trying to catch spies.
Absolutely. That's a very good way to say that. And, think of counterintelligence as an umbrella, right? And in that umbrella is, disinformation, misinformation, spy ops, theft of intellectual property and trade secrets, right? Buying land here in the U.S., sending rogue agents here to take Chinese people back to China. Like, we're trying to counter all of that, right? Russian spies doing bad things. Espionage is one of those forks in the umbrella, right?
Right.
So this was a joint counter-espionage task force. We worked together since Ames and Hansen to try and vet out who in the American government is spying on behalf of other foreign countries, mostly, Russia, China, but we had some from Israel as well and Iran. But who are those people? And this joint group of people, a couple hundred, the FBI executive was in charge of it, and that happened to be me. And it was a fascinating time there.
And the first one you had to deal with, it sounds like, was the resignation of David Petraeus, and that classified information was divulged to his mistress.
Yep. Not an easy case, for sure. Not an easy case to be able to facilitate. It wasn't easy for him. I mean, he landed on his feet, obviously, but I'm sure it was incredibly embarrassing, not only for his wife and everything, but, he somehow escaped charges there. I mean, a lot of top secret information went to her. She wrote books about it and agendas, and it is what it is, was what it was. But at the time, so now you're talking circa 2013, 12, 13, 14 there, we had a lot going on. We had a lot of we call them unsub cases where we knew Americans were spying on behalf of China and Russia and Iran. We just didn't know who they were, right? Mm-hmm. So it was basically, who done it? Like, who are these people? How do we find out, right?
When that happens, what are your indications that it's going on in the first place? Like, what are generally the first, hints or clues that there is espionage happening?
So great question. So let's take China, for instance. Back in 2009 and 10, and it's been publicly reported, there's probably been between 25 and 40, we'll call them assets, the CIA had recruited, FBI had recruited, who disappeared, who were going to jail, and they were murdered, right, publicly. So, that's a problem. Something's going on here, right? And then if you go back to the Hansen and Ames days, same thing. when you have all these assets, they're not showing up for their meet, and then they're getting killed. You're like, something is bad is happening here, right? So someone in our shop is divulging this information, who these people are, to the Chinese, the Russians, and Iranians. And at the same time, not just humans, but you might have a collection, of a specific office, like in someone's, personal space, a foreign leader, and that goes dead, right? Or you have maybe an informant that's driving that guy around, and they go missing, and then you're up on their cell phone and that goes off. All these things, you got to put these little stars and bullets together to say something's amiss here, right? Mm-hmm. We have something amiss, and then you get like human informants. The CIA is phenomenal at this, and you have maybe an informant who tells you, hey, our mainline KR guy, Russian guy who does human intelligence and recruitment, our main KR guy is going next Thursday. He'll be in Mexico City. Well, we know the only reason he's going there is to meet someone from the U.S., right? So then we have to figure out who the hell in the U.S. government is going to Mexico City, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're literally on a mole hunt trying to figure out, is it someone from the CIA, the FBI, NSA, NRO, NGA, DIA? That's the first circle of people that work big top secret stuff. Or is it someone from the Department of Energy, Department of Labor, right? You just don't know. But then how do we figure out, get flight manifest, who's going to Mexico City next week? Mm-hmm. Or maybe they're already there with their family on vacation, right? And when do they get, so that process begins in earnest to say, and then we say, okay, we're going to send a joint surveillance team down to Mexico City, and we're going to go follow this Russian guy to see who he meets with, right? So that's the process where this counter-espionage group would do all that work.
Mm. I've heard that's a story like that, about how like the Russians would send like their main headhunter, like their best human guy that pitches and recruits the highest level people. They like send him to the United States, and he'll be driving around, on the West Coast, like freaking the FBI the hell out because God only knows what he's doing. But then, as you described, you guys have to figure out, is it just deception? Is he just screwing with us? Or is this the real thing? But you can't ignore it.
100%. Yes. So if it was the main guy, he's meeting somebody, right? They're not sending him here for nothing. But he might be here for 2 or 3 weeks, and he might meet somebody on day 11, for 13 seconds at a Wawa in Philadelphia, right? So we can't even, and there's been plenty of times when they were here and they'd be going and get coffee, and we would get caught breaking into their hotel room, right? Because they know we're doing this, right? So his job is to be able to meet or do that dead drop and meet that person without getting caught. Our job is to somehow find, so that's a cat and mouse game, obviously. But yes, they also will send maybe the number 2, number 3, number 4 guy, and they'll drive around for weeks, and they're not meeting anybody.
Yeah. It's probably
killing our resources.
It's probably tough when an entire state is a cover stop, right?
Oh, 100%. They would go to Niagara Falls all the time, and it was like, oh, here we go. The falls are nice, but they're not that nice, right?
Yeah.
So,
did during that time frame, do you recall ever like you or your guys observing an operational act, like catching one of these guys red-handed?
Absolutely. So I'm going to say, when I was at the FBI counterintelligence in Washington Field, at the CIA, and then later as director of NCSC, there were multiple times where we would catch these individuals red-handed. But we didn't always know what they were doing, right? So you would get like a technical officer of the FSB or an MSS officer going to a parking lot where there's a bunch of contractors, and they would take a backpack out of their back of their car, and they put it up on their car, they'd open it up, they'd look around, and clearly they're exfiltrating some data somewhere. We just don't know where, right? So a couple times we had some rogue agents, steal that backpack, and we get in a lot of trouble and have to give it back to them. But yes, it's frustrating when we know they're actually doing something technically, but we just don't know exactly what it is. So it's problematic.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, counterintelligence is known to be a little bit more aggressive than intelligence, as I understand it. But when you're working domestically, I mean, you have to work within the confines of American law.
You do, and looking at a perspective and from an FBI, ecosystem where you're built in an ethos of arresting people and indicting, and that's not the case. So you're really excited about maybe a neutralization, right? or I mean, that's really, if you can neutralize an intelligence officer's activity here, that's great. Or a PNG, right? Where you can get State Department to PNG someone out of the embassy because you caught them red-handed. That's like a big deal, right? So there's no really excitement where you get a rah-rah because you neutralize the guy. But if you could get them to not meet that source or not collect that intelligence out of a defense industrial base contractor or whatever it is they're doing, that's a big deal, right? But, growing up in that ecosystem where it's handcuffs, indictments, and jail, now in counterintelligence, it is not that, right? It is neutralizations, and and I would say that would be the biggest aspect of the differentiation.
What were some of the big cultural differences between FBI and CIA?
I'd say the biggest difference. Let's start with the way they work, right? So the FBI, they recruit and you work in teams of 2, 3, 5, 10. The CIA, you work by yourself, right? So they recruit people who could go overseas and live a life by themselves and do great things and not have to worry about friendships and family, right? So there's two different people. Well, those people end up growing up through the CIA and they're still the same. So there's a lot of reservedness in them, a lot of lack of trust, because they grew their bona fides and their successes in the CIA because they were phenomenal at working alone, right? And doing amazing things for the U.S. government that are never going to be known by themselves in an alleyway like in Cyprus, right? All of a sudden now they're back in Langley and they're asked to be on a team. It's a little bit different, right? So I was more of a rah, let's make this team thing. Let's get it a little bit more. And where the FBI was all about team all the time. So that's the number one culture I'd see there. Number two is FBI agents are always, it's about the law, right? You have Department of Justice, you have the domestic guidelines book, you have all these rules. The CIA didn't have a whole lot of that, right? So it's kind of like culturally, what in this task force, what can we do that satisfies both books of being okay, right? And oftentimes we always yielded to the CIA way because it was cooler, more fun, and less DOJ.
And during this time, you also kind of dealt with some rogue CIA employees, some other rogue U.S. government employees. Not sure where to start. Do you? I mean, I think you touched on it a little bit, but Jerry Lee.
Yeah. So I think just in general, going to just be able to do a lateral across time frame. So I'm in the FBI. I'm in charge of counterintelligence there for a while with my partners who were doing espionage, and they were working these cases, these unsub cases. Then I go to the CIA. We're still working these unsub cases. We know things are going bad, right? And then by the time I leave the CIA and I go to be head of counterintelligence, during that time, we end up solving these cases. The amazing women and men of the CIA and FBI who do just great work, finally getting to the position where, like Jerry Lee's one of them. We investigated him for a long time. And we finally, sucked him into coming back to the U.S. and we got him to confess to being a spy. We have, Alex Ma, another CIA case officer who would eventually, we caught him. He ended up confessing. And you had Kevin Mallory, a real jerk CIA case officer. We worked him for a long time. We ended up catching him because he had horrific tradecraft, selling things to the CIA. So it's good for me over my years to be able to say, okay, I was a part of that, I saw that, and now they're all coming through fruition, right? So as you see, we just arrested, his name is Rocha from the State Department. He was spying for the Cubans since the 70s, right? So you don't always get immediate gratification here. Over time, it's a golf clap, exciting, but it's just also awesome to see that the women and men who do this for a living don't give up, right? And over years, they just don't give up.
I think that one factor that a lot of people might not consider is the caution that you guys have to approach something with, because if you do finger the wrong person or even put them under a lens, you don't even have to say this is the person, to just put them under a lens, that could tarnish their career forever if they are innocent.
It's happened multiple times, right? And then if you look back to Robert Hansen, the FBI spy, right? We caught him and we arrested him in 2001, February or March, I believe. Up to that point, we knew there was another spy, right? We knew Ames wasn't the only guy. We knew, and the FBI agents who were working this case, they thought for sure it was a guy named Brian Kelly, right? He was done, and they investigated him. They FISA'd him, and did a complete life enema with his family. It was terrible, right? Terrible.
Right.
And then we finally, through great human work by the CIA, we end up getting tapes from a defector source in Moscow that has voice on it, who the spy is, and it turns out to be Rob Hansen. Well, what do you say to Kelly? I'm sorry. It's not easy, right? So this is a dirty world, and it's not always fun, and it always doesn't end well.
Yeah.
I want to ask you real quick, as far as these CIA employees going rogue, based on your experience and observations, I mean, what's their motivations? What kind of makes these people tick, and why do they go off the rails?
Yeah. So, just challenge the question a little bit. It's not always CIA agents going rogue. Right?
I know.
We've had NSA, plenty of FBI. So they're I would say, intelligence officials going rogue, right? So, and I've been in the insider threat business a long time. It used to be up to probably 2001 to 5 to 8. It was a thing called mice, right? It was, what motivated them? It was mostly money, right? So we look at Hansen and Ames, they're making millions of dollars spying on the Russians. It was a lot up to probably 2012 and 13. The FBI agent who gave away all the radio codes to the Chinese, again, money. His family lived in China. He was helping out his family. And the Chinese are phenomenal at the way they micro attack Chinese nationals here in the U.S. who have family back there. Just phenomenal to do that. And then, God forbid, you have you're ethnic Chinese and you're working in the intelligence community, you're going to be screwed, right? So he was giving all this stuff up. He pled guilty to 10 years. NSA's got a bunch of them as well. I think over time, you see the last 10 years, people who are spying, specifically of China and Russia, very little money. You're like, wait a minute, you're going to give up your life and your career and go to jail forever for $10,000? What's going on? It turns out to be more ideology, and I would call it disenfranchisement.
Yeah.
I look at it as that individual who says, what the cripes, nobody thinks I'm good. I applied for this job 3 times and I didn't get it. Like, my boss is not treating me well. They maybe have some trouble at home. It's an opportunity for, I would call it disenfranchisement. And if you look at now, all the government employees who are being removed in the last, 3, 4, 5 months, the Doge effect, right? 1,300 State Department just got 1,300 State Department employees just got fired last Friday. I'm concerned about them, right? They have a lot of stuff up here that you just need 1 or 2 of them to say, screw this. I'm going to send an email to the Chinese or the Russians, and then we give away the farm, right? So it's really, really complicated. And I would say the 50s, 60s, and part of 70s, it was ideology. 80s and 90s, early parts, it was money, a lot of money. And then subsequent that, it's back to a little bit more ideology. And I would say disenfranchisement, because the Russians and Chinese know they don't have to pay anybody because it's not worth it. And then the woman who left and defected to Iran, Monica Witt, ideology, right? So didn't take a dime, and she gave up a lot of bad things in ideology. So I would say we're back to disenfranchisement, the angry employee, and it's changed over 30 years.
Would you put Edward Snowden in that category?
Absolutely. Disenfranchised employee. He was lost. He was a contractor for a couple different organizations, working in the NSA, CIA. No one liked him. He was an asshole, right? So he treated everybody bad. So the supervisors didn't treat him well. And I say supervisors, not only in the NSA, but as well as at Booz Allen, where he worked, and other contractors. He just wasn't treated well because he wasn't a nice dude. And he thought he should make more money, have more jobs. Just wasn't the case. And he was a technically proficient scumbag, right? So he was able to do really, really horrific things that at the time, I'm not sure anyone in the government and the intelligence committee knew that was capable of being doing with Tor and the way he took things. So that was a wake-up call for sure.
And then you had some involvement in the Vault 7 case too, right?
Well, not really. I was already the head of counterintelligence at that time, but the CIA worked that case. But that went back to those days, right? So that was an unsub case where we started saying, what's going on? Why are we missing this stuff? And he went to trial. So it all blends together, but I didn't have anything to do with that case.
And I know this maybe gets into the sensitive side, but are there any operations from this time frame bringing in different agencies that you're allowed to talk about, or maybe with some non-specific information talk about?
Yeah. So again, when I was head of counterintelligence, the cool part of it in my job was to be like the quarterback of all the agencies actually do stuff, right? So at NCSC, we really didn't do anything. We were like the quarterbacks, the people who hosted and came up with a strategy, a policy that we would go after X, Y, and Z, and then we would facilitate and pay for all the agencies to do it, right? Oh my goodness, I can't even tell you. Being able to utilize maybe some tier 1 assets that as Iraq and Afghanistan were gearing down, we had some great human assets to be able to take them in a creative way and convince DOD to put them against hard targets in Europe. It's fascinating, right? And then give that a shot. And then you have, DOD and JSOC. Are they okay with their assets reporting now to a chief of station, right? So you had all that dichotomy, right? It was a challenge, and being in the middle of that was really fun. At the same time, we were doing some amazing things as the government, like we do. We build things and we make things that we want to keep secret. Mm-hmm. So my organization would entail bringing in FBI, CIA, Coast Guard, Department of Transportation, and we would obfuscate around that, and we would get the Chinese and Russians to believe that we were actually doing it in Florida, when in reality we were doing it in Washington State, right? So then we would monitor the Chinese and the Russians doing surveillance in that location in Florida. We would have metrics and feedback to say, how many ships are they putting in the Gulf? How many humans are they putting on the ground? What kind of technical collection are they doing from Cuba on that location in Florida? Meanwhile, we're doing what we need to do from maybe Washington to Alaska without them knowing it.
I imagine, and I don't know, but I imagine whether it's like our shipbuilding or building the next generation fighter, that there has to be a counterintelligence plan built into all of that from the get-go.
There is. From moment one, there is. And then when you could look back to say where there wasn't, you could show me, I'll show you the failure, right? Where it didn't happen. From a supply chain perspective. And I think to your other question, off the top of my head, I just remembered something. So 2020, we have COVID. Mm-hmm. And under Trump, I'm in the job, and we got to build a vaccine, right, from scratch. Well, so does the Chinese, right? So as part of an Operation Warp Speed, my job was to lead the counterintelligence program to protect the development of that vaccine, from ideation to the small town labs that were doing testing, to Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer, protecting movement of stuff from point A to point B, working with sheriffs and state police. So from the time it was thought of till it actually went in an arm, we had to protect that vaccine. So it wasn't the Chinese were trying to not only steal it, but they were trying to disrupt us from making it, right? Because the big deal, right? So that, to me, that was working with the Army hand in hand with that was just fascinating. Say what you want about the vaccine, everybody's all over the map on that, but from a counterintelligence perspective, we, the women and men of the counterintelligence programs, the police departments, the state police, and the Army did a phenomenal job of protecting that we developed.
Wasn't there, I can't remember, and my memory's not great, but wasn't there some weird stuff that went on? Wasn't there like a Chinese American scientist who was like working on the vaccine that was killed down like Pennsylvania or something like that? I can't remember now.
I don't know that.
Okay, all right. I
would not say it's not true, but I don't recall that.
Yeah.
So
because if I said yes, you would ask me if we did it, but so I'm not saying no.
No. I think he was on our side working on it, and got killed. But I don't remember the details.
Yeah. So the last part of this thing is like from a domestic operation perspective during Warp Speed, we were able to waive a lot of the existing policies, restrictions to be able to do stuff. So we were able to get up real quick and do things technically to avoid the Chinese from doing what they wanted to do, whether it be geofencing and all that kind of cool stuff that you can't normally do. But this was a big national emergency, right? And it was really fun to be in that space, countering another country's want to steal what we were trying to develop.
That's cool. And so 2014, you get assigned to the Office of National Counterintelligence. I think, again, we should probably start by, having you tell us what that office actually is and what it does and how it integrates with the rest of the government.
Absolutely. And analogous to what I talked about with the Counter-Espionage group, where there's a legislatively in charge person of the CIA. Subsequent to Hansen and Ames, the Congress created the National Counterintelligence Executive. So this was the one person who would lead and run all counterintelligence activities of all the agencies in the government. That person had an office. So it was called the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive. So that person, the first one was a guy named Bear Bryant from the FBI. So that office existed. So I went over there in June of 14 and took over the job, and I wanted to change it. So what we ended up doing is making it an office of counterintelligence. We wanted to make it a center under the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Under the DNI, they had the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC. So I said, well, we should have the Counterintelligence Center. It should be the same.
Sure.
And then so December of 2014, we had the ribbon cutting of the National Counterintelligence Security Center, like NCTC. And then next year, Congress loved everything we're doing. They decided to make my position a presidential appointee and Senate confirmed position.
So so you were there beforehand, but did you then have to go and get confirmed by the Senate?
Yep. So I got nominated by President Trump in 2018. I had my hearing in May of 2018. I came out of the Senate Intelligence Committee unanimously, and then I had a hold put on me by Senator Grassley because nothing about me, but he wanted administrative information on the Department of Justice and so forth. So I probably was on hold for a year. I was still in the job, still doing it. And then the hold was dropped in 2020. And then I got confirmed by the entire Senate in 2020 as the first Senate confirmed head of counterintelligence security for America, which is pretty cool. So to be able to represent the women and men all over the world doing really cool stuff was pretty humbling for me.
That's amazing.
I'd love to ask you a little bit about that confirmation process. I think it'd be great for people to hear that. Just ask you what that process was like when you went in and talked to the Senate. Was there like a classified portion of that and a non-classified portion of it?
Yes. So I had already been briefing these women and men on the Senate for years, right? So as an FBI agent, as a CIA head of, so they knew me. I had briefed them a million times. So they knew my motive. They knew all the cases. So that was pretty easy. But so I would say for every one open hearing, there was 20 closed hearings, right, of really important stuff. So by the time my actual open hearing came around, it was pretty uneventful, right? Okay. So at the time, Senator Wyden hit me pretty hard on privacy and whistleblowers I had 89 votes. So I did pretty well bipartisanly, right? And both Senator Burr at the time and Senator Warner, who were chair and vice chair, very supported me very much, and then Senator Rubio. So I had some bipartisan support during that time, and then that all went away during the election.
What else was I going to ask you about that? So what was your impression kind of interacting with the legislative branch, as a counterintelligence official? Was that like a difficult process? Were they pretty receptive to the not just the investigations, but sometimes operations that you have to pitch?
Yes. So that's a great question, and my goodness gracious. So the answer is yes. So as part of my job, also counterintelligence security, I was also the guy in the organization that did security clearance reform, right? So a lot of that was like, why do the clearances take so long? So a lot of that drama, right, is part of that. But earlier on, I'm going to say when I first got in the job, in probably 2010 to 2013, 14, the House was the primary intelligence organization. It was called HPSI, the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Back then, they were the big dog, and SISI on the Senate side was probably not as big, right? Over time, So now you fast forward to 2014, I'm in the job now as the head of counterintelligence. HIPSI decides to do their own investigation on Snowden, just because they can. So now I have that whole thing. So you have that whole butting heads with, staffers and members of the Hill wanting to do their own investigation because they don't believe that what we're doing is good enough. And over time, I'd say, 2016, the House side goes high right? So you have Democrats come in power, Adam Schiff, and it goes really bad. They're not bipartisan anymore. You have Schiff and Nunez, and then, it's just not a good situation at all. And then the Senate takes primacy, right? So 15, 16, 17, 18, the Senate grows. You had great bipartisanship there between Senator Burr and Senator Warner and Senator Rubio, Senator Cotton. You had a lot of really good senators that wanted to do the right thing for America. And they became the preeminent intelligence oversight committee, and they still are. But yes, in the depths of the classified briefings and the skiffs, it gets pretty hairy. It gets pretty knuckle dragging, yelling and screaming. But for the most part, these the senators have some great ideas, some great thoughts, and they get their own briefings from individual agencies, so they have some ideas. And then we have to ask them for money to do some really cool stuff. So there's a lot of skiffed meetings with members and staffers, a lot. I mean, You're talking like 3 to 4 a week of that. So keeping them advised and informed of what's going on in our world. Same thing with terrorism. It's just, if you get on one of the intelligence committees, it's a hard job. There's a lot going on there.
The other thing about this time frame is I wanted to ask you, you were telling us a little bit before the show about some of the cultural issues in counterintelligence, including in the Counterintelligence Center, and how you and some of the other guys are kind of like miserable by the job because there's such an emphasis on the failures rather than the successes, and how you kind of reversed that.
Yeah, great question. I'm not sure I reversed it, but I certainly mitigated it a little bit. But first on the culture side, in the FBI, everyone's there. They're all type A's. Everyone does their job. You're a born leader. You aren't, but you don't have to lead a whole lot of people, right? Everything just happens really organically. When I went over to the CIA, it was the first time I really had to work my ass off to be a good leader, right? Because now I'm in charge of a whole bunch of people from a different culture who don't know me and don't know the Bureau way, and I have to facilitate their way, right? My job is to ingratiate myself with them and their culture. I worked really hard at that, and it was not easy, but I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about leadership, leading people from other cultures. It was really cathartic, and I learned a lot, and I became a much better person being in charge of women and men from a different agency. And they taught me a lot about being able to transform yourself into a human being where you could thrive in someone else's culture. And I thought that was fun, challenging, and unique. The second part of it, the question, I believe you were talking about the negativity of the job. I mean, listen, no one's going to say that counterintelligence and security is sexy, right? It's not. It's depressing. It's all bad stuff. And, in my time as the director of NCSC, from the breach of OPM on, right, you've got breach after breach after breach, government, private sector, the White House was breached, the State Department was breached. We had companies every day getting breached. It's negative. We had intelligence operations going bad all over the world. It was not good, right? We had underground cables in the oceans being cut by the Russians, and it was just nonstop negativity. So I want to say by the fall of my first year in the job, I was a mess, right? So I would come home. My wife was like, "What is wrong with you?" And at the time, I had a young teenage boy, and I was trying to coach Little League. I was a mess. So I said, "There's got to be something out here. We got to be able to do something." So I had some people give me some advice. We ended up creating what's called a white binder. So that binder was basically 4 to 5 vignettes that you would read every day before we're going home of the awesome successes we've had around the world, right? And whether or not just here in the U.S., but things that we did in Asia and Africa and against the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, the Cubans, just successes, whether it be NCIS, OSI, DIA, Department of Treasury, it didn't make a difference. That on day one was a winner, right? So day one, I'm going home now, all revved up excited because we were kicking ass around the world, right? And no one's going to know about this. No one's going to make a movie about these things. So you do that over 4, 5, 6 days. Now, 3 months in, it's like a addictive drug. I can't wait till I'm getting ready to go home to read what they put in my white binder, right? Because that's what's going to get me motivated to go home, hug my family, spend time with my kids, and want to come back the next day, right? So to me, I found that to be something that I handed that off to my successor. And I think it's now a fairly commonplace in the intelligence community, is have your little white happy binder where you can learn about awesome things that awesome people are doing around the world to protect America.
And you were saying the information that was collected in those binders was eventually used to hand out awards to these folks?
Oh, yeah. Great point. So what we ended up doing, probably Christmas time of that first year, I'm like, hey, listen, everyone should know about this amazing things. Like, I remember one time, one of the ones I read was just an amazing counterintelligence operation the Marine Corps did with the Coast Guard. I'm like, the Marine Corps and the Coast Guard doing counterintelligence? Who would know? Like, I would never know this, right? So what we decided to do, myself and my deputy at the time, Connie, who was former COS at Beijing at CIA, she was a CIA case officer. We're going to have an award ceremony in the summertime. And we're going to take the best and brightest of these, and we're going to bring their families in. So we did. The first one we did was in the summer of 2000, I guess it would have been 15. And we had a board made up of maybe 5 or 6 agencies, their representatives that picked the winners. And those winners, they came in they brought their families in. We gave them a big medal and award. We read what they did, as unclassified as we can, but their families got to come in and see, hey, my mom, my dad is doing amazing things to protect this nation, its people, its places. And I didn't know about this. And we recognized them not only in front of their leadership, but in front of their family, and we ended up doing that and still today.
And tell us then, during this time frame, before we move on to the next thing, was there any other ops or actions or anything that you'd like to highlight that you guys did?
I'm trying to think what could be talked about here. Probably not a whole lot I could talk about on here. Other than, yeah, probably not that one either. No, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But I will say that the things that we got to do involved 5, 6, sometimes 10 or 12 agencies, right? And unique to this, not only are the agencies that never get looked at in this world, like the Marine Corps, the Coast Guard, OSI, NCIS, just do amazing work in these cases around the world. And the Coast Guard just doesn't get any credit for the amount of work they do in intelligence and counterintelligence because they have amazing capabilities, resources, shipboarding. We boarded a lot of ships to help the FBI and CIA. The Coast Guard facilitated that. So the world and the ecosystem of the military is pretty fascinating outside just, kinetic weaponry.
Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about the run up to your retirement in 2021.
So 2020, we're in the midst of this COVID chaos. Everyone's working, 15 feet from each other. It was just surreal time to be a government employee working in the intelligence community with COVID. So we, as you know, 2016, the government did not do the best job in the election cycle, right? So whether it be Russian stuff, Chinese stuff, briefing of the candidates, it just was poorly done. So I get confirmed by the Senate in April, I think, of 2020. At that time, the decision was made by people bigger than me that we are going to do a better job in 2020 election. And we are going to start giving classified briefings of the candidates, their staffs, the RNC, DNC, and every member of Congress. Well, lo and behold, I got in charge of that. So I was the principal briefer of all of this, right? So we started in a good, maybe May or June of that. We started off good, both the Trump and Biden campaigns, the RNC, DNC, and then we started briefing all the committees in the Hill. It was going pretty well. And then I sent out a letter probably had to be July or August of that summer, basically saying, hey, we have 100 years to the election. Here's what we're seeing so far. Declassified information. We're seeing the Russians do this, the Chinese do this, the Iranians do this. Well, the Democrats on the Hill went ballistic. The fact that we even recognized the fact that China, Russia, or Iran were doing anything. Because for them, it was Russia, Russia, Russia. And I say the Democrats, mostly like Schiff and Adam Schiff and those folks and Pelosi, they were furious the fact that we declassified information that Chinese were favoring this, that, whatever. So we did more classified briefings, and I came up with a follow-up memo where we laid out actual people. Said, hey, this guy Andre Derchak was actually doing things to facilitate election interference, and the intelligence community had some intelligence they released that said basically we believe, that one country is favoring this candidate's being favored by this country. We put that out again. Again, the politicians went ballistic, berserk, right? So it just was an ugly, ugly situation. And you want to talk about politicizing the intelligence, right? That starts in Congress, right? And it was because you have the anti-Trump. I don't want to say anti-Trump, the hatred of Trump, right? And then you have Republicans going against Biden. To be an intelligence apparatus during that time frame was very difficult, right? Because you had women and men in the intelligence community collecting information, doing assessments, and no matter what we gave to the members of the Hill, it was politicized, right? So it was problematic at the time. So I decided in September of that year that I was not coming back. I had been there 6.5 years. I said, I'm leaving on inauguration day, regardless of who wins this election. But fortunately for us, we were able to vet out that, yes, the Chinese were doing stuff and the Iranians were doing stuff. We had a big press conference on Iran. And then it all ended up working out well, but it was not for lack of incredible anxiety and stress on my part, right? So it was a rough 6 months for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I can't only imagine what it would be like that, as a federal law enforcement officer, you're trying to maintain your impartiality, serve, just as a police officer, essentially. But at the level you're at, you're having to deal with Congress and getting pulled in these two directions. It must have been very hard to maintain that balance.
Yeah, it is. And again, you want to try and, at the end of the day, number one, maintain your integrity, right? And it is. And fortunately for me, my boss at the time, the DNI Ratcliffe and the Chief of Staff Meadows and the President, no one ever interfered with me. No one ever asked me to change anything. No one ever asked me to make a comma or include this or not include that. So everyone was straight up on that. It's just that when you got to the Hill, the politicization there was, again, they got to win elections, right? I get all that, right? And then the women and men of the intelligence community and myself, we were part of the pawns in that game. It is what it is. You got to put your big boy pants on and go deal with it.
So you retire in 2021 and then start up the Evanina group. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So when I retired, I said I had a plan to be able to basically do what I was doing in my old job, but make more money doing it. Right. So I wanted to be basically a strategic consultant for companies to help them neutralize, defeat, and defend against China. So it was my big thing. So I was big on intellectual property theft. I had worked really hard on China for years, and we had done these road shows. Myself and Senator Burr, Rubio, and Warner would travel around the country. We would brief all these CEOs on what China is doing, from IP theft to trade secrets to penetration to cyber, you name it whatsoever. And then at the time, I think 2020. We had the largest number. It was like $600 billion they had stole from theft of intellectual property and trade secrets just in 1 year. $600 billion. And then once we aggregated that up to be like $4,000 per American family of four after taxes, I said, listen, I got to do a better job of this, right? We did not do a good job in the government. So I said, listen, I'm going to do this for business. I'm going to go out and advise and inform companies and help them defend against China. So that's basically my company. So I have these really cool tabletop exercises that are 30 minutes long for executives to walk them through a breach or cyber or an insider threat, an active shooter. It doesn't make a difference. But also just basically saying, hey, here's the threats we face from the Communist Party of China. Here's how we have to mitigate them. And here's what you make, you sell, you procure that they're coming after. And here's how you can help defend it.
I think we have some questions from viewers there, D, if you can pull those up.
Sure, just give me 1 second.
I actually have one follow-up question before we get into the viewer questions. From your point of view, I would love to hear your take on Havana syndrome.
Well, I'm very clear about in the public sphere. Oh boy, where to even start this? Because it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
So President Obama, I'll go this way, and I've said this publicly on CNN a million times. Sanjay Gupta did a whole special on this, and I was very clear about my thoughts. President Obama said in his second term that we were going to open relations with Cuba, and we opened an embassy there, and we were doing very well, and we were doing very well, and the intelligence apparatus in the United States were doing very well, right? Not just against the Cubans, but who else is there? The Russians are there, right? So all of a sudden, people start getting sick, getting hurt, injured. We got to close the embassy. There's only one country in the world that wins with that. That's not the Cubans, right? So for me, I am convinced, without evidence, I think there's plenty of evidence. 60 Minutes has done some really good pieces here on this, that it started in Havana. They called it Havana syndrome, but, AHI, they call it now, is pretty prevalent. There's a lot of women and men who are incredibly bad shape. People have died. It's been well documented. To me, there's only one country that benefits from doing this, and that's Russia. Now, that being said, proving it is a secondary thing. I think this administration is doing a much better job of being transparent about the evidence. The previous administration was not. But I think this administration, you're starting to see more data coming out on this. But I will say this as well. And even if we get a defector or we recruit a Russian, Ivan, to come out and say, I was the guy that did this, and here's the weapon, people are still going to think that's not enough evidence, right? So, at the end of the day, we'll never get to a place where we can prove this. Secondarily, in big picture apparatus, what happens if we do prove this? What happens if it's unequivocally the Russians? Then what? Right? So you have a foreign country who's harmed severely a lot of U.S. citizens that are U.S. government employees. Then what do we do, right? So the answer sometimes is not always good to know, right? So I think at the end of the day, if the government ever does find out unequivocally that it was the Russians, it probably won't be disclosed anytime soon.
What do you make of the claims of people getting hit here in the United States? Because it's been quite a few FBI people hit or have claimed to have been hit. I don't mean to be skeptical, but I mean, what do you think?
Yep. So I'm not skeptical because I know some of the people that are sick, right? But to be able to say it's the same weaponry that was used in Havana or in Vienna or any place else in Mexico City, I don't know that to be true. I just know that people are really sick. Historically, the Russians have been very reluctant to do anything here in the U.S. But doesn't mean they haven't done it systematically recently to obfuscate all the other stuff around the world, right? It could be another country doing it to blame the Russians, right, if that's the case. There's been some people that hit literally close to the White House. So geopolitically, I find it hard to fathom Putin being okay with this, right? So you think about how he screws up everything else with the Skripals and, Litvinenko. They're not good at these ops. The Russians are bad at these things, right? So they get caught in most of their assassination attempts. So I'm really skeptical that they would let them do this. But the other part of it is there's a lot of women and men in the State Department, CIA, and the FBI who are really sick. So I just don't know. My argument is I don't think we're putting enough resources to this that we should. This should be a massive undertaking with women and men full-time doing this investigation, which it's not.
D, what do we have from viewers?
Give me 1 second. From M, we have, can you talk a bit about how closely China's publicly declared 5-year plan seemed to match the actions that you saw them take the actions you saw them take during your time in government?
Great question. So not only did they match, they incredibly surpassed those. I mean, let's talk about China's Made in 2025 plan, where they were very clear about, Xi was very clear about obtaining the world's best intelligence on quantum and advanced manufacturing and biopharma. Not only did they reach that, but they outdid themselves with mostly through theft, of intellectual property and trade secrets, and be able to do joint ventures and mergers and getting all the technology. I mean, they have the Cormac airplane that they just rolled out, which is basically they stole everything from Boeing and Airbus A320. So everything's been stolen. And I think if you look at their 5-year plans, the 2025 year plan has been very successful from a Chinese perspective, obtaining the intelligence they wanted to get in the top 10 tiers of technology.
I have a question about the Chinese because, in a free country against a, kind of totalitarian country, like, you mentioned their tactics with like Chinese Americans who may have relatives over or in China, where, a Chinese agent will bump up against them and say, hey, how's your grandmother? Have you talked to her lately? Here's a picture of me with her. How does the U.S. obviously not cut out Chinese Americans from technology and universities and laboratories, but how do we defend against that type of intelligence service?
You got to fight through it, right? And again, I've been a victim of this a lot, many years. That hey, you are racist against Chinese. You are racist. This is a racist rant, right? Because that's what the Chinese intelligence services want everybody to do. Is racist. You got to fight through it. You can't cower, right? We've cowered a lot. I have not cowered, and I basically make sure I tell them it's not the Chinese people. This is the government, the Communist Party of China, that's doing this.
Right.
They're utilizing, like a lot of the students that are here in the U.S. spying on behalf of China. Majority of them are doing it unwittingly, right? And they come over here. If there's 320,000 students from China every year, there's only about 6,000 of them that are actually bad, right? The ones that are doing, high-level STEM postgraduate work. And even those, they don't know that they're going to do anything for the government until they're asked.
Right. Or
But
told.
right?
Yeah.
What are you working on over there? I'm working on quantum computing and da-da-da-da. Oh, could you send us what you're working on? Sure, I'll send it to you. They don't even know that's bad, right? So that's the problem. Secondarily, like from an education perspective, there's 242 Chinese companies on the U.S. stock market. There's 0 U.S. companies on the Chinese stock market.
Yeah.
The Chinese government, through fake companies, have bought probably 300 to 400 pieces of property in the United States around U.S. military installations and nuclear sites.
Yep.
We can't go to China and buy anything.
Yeah.
They have 320,000 students here. There's probably not 30 in China of Americans. Right. So it's not a two-way street.
Yeah.
Can you also talk about how you think about China's corruption purges in the last few years? Clearly, that was a genuine threat to them in certain ways, but to what degree do you think it was about Xi's consolidating power?
Yeah, great question. It's both of them, actually. So you look, I'm going to say the last 2 years of not only the arrest, the disappearance of leaders around him, the quote-unquote retirement, the executions, right? It's 2 things. Number 1, 3 things. Him telling the desperate people in China, I'm the boss, and I'll make all these decisions. Secondarily, he doesn't trust people around him, at all, especially those who might be conspiring or might be someone who might challenge him in a couple of years. So he's got to get rid of those. Third, if they're not being aggressive enough, what he wants from a Defense Department perspective or making progress in Taiwan or the Philippines, you're going to be out. And the last one, money. Chinese are incredibly corrupt, and it's part of their culture. It's unlike in America. We look at corrupt as like a bad thing. China, it's not a bad thing. So if you are making a lot of money in a corrupt fashion in Beijing, and to the point where Xi doesn't like it, you're out. And then if you're lucky, he'll let you walk away somewhere with your money, but usually they get jailed. So he's very vicious. He might be the most maniacal man in our lifetime, Xi Jinping, right? Putin is evil in his own way, but Xi Jinping's hatred for us is number 1. But his fear of his own population makes him incredibly maniacal.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with Operation Solo? If so, should this have remained for internal use only?
No, I'm not familiar with Operation Solo.
A couple more. What can tech companies and U.S. government do to combat disinformation?
Yeah, disinformation. So I got this one last week. Where do I get my news from? Well, I honestly, I wake up in the morning, I go right to BBC America. I find out where the news is. Where is it? And then I go to Yahoo News because it's very straight down the middle. It's basically what's the news with no commentary. From the tech perspective, I would find the most conservative-based technical news bulletin website information gathering that you can in your genre, whether you're doing micro biology or whether you're doing nanotechnology or you're doing the most latest quantum physics. Find a niche where you can go onto a forum and get the latest and greatest information and stay away from mainstream media.
Alrighty, one more. Nord Stream pipeline, was that the Russians?
I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea. I never heard of that pipeline.
I actually have a question. So, Bill, in your career, have you ever had like holy shit moments? I can't believe this is going on, and like freaked out kind of moments in terms of like penetrations in whether it's the FBI, CIA, or any of the agencies?
More than I could possibly imagine. Yes, and they just. So I'll give you one up top. It's when the Chinese breached and they took the data out of OPM, right? So okay, they took OPM data. It's a bad day, right? Bad day. They took until you get into it and find out what they actually took. The oh shit moment was for me is like, well, not only did they take Bill Evanina's information, but they took my entire top secret background investigation file.
Yeah.
Every page of it.
Yeah.
Right. So me and 21 million Americans, not 21 million Americans who applied, but the people who actually didn't get clearances. All the negative, derogatory, your old wives and girlfriends who said bad things about you, your college roommate who said you smoked cocaine on a car and a train track, they have all that, right? So for me, that was one of the biggest oh shit moments for me was like, oh my goodness, this is really, really bad, right? That's number one, it's really bad. But I'll fast forward to a recent event. You may or may not be familiar with Volt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon, right? So Volt Typhoon is the Chinese putting malware on critical infrastructure in the U.S. to make it, to destroy it, to make it not work, right? In preparation of the battlefield. Well, Salt Typhoon was their penetration of Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. So they were able to get in those telecommunications companies. They were not only able to steal data, lawfare data, FISA data that the FBI has been using for subpoenas, but they were able to listen to U.S. telephone calls. Think about this. The FBI would need a search warrant or FISA to do this, right? The NSA can't do it, nor can the CIA, but a foreign nation is listening to U.S.-based phone calls. For me, that's an oh shit moment.
Yeah. We've talked about the challenges with the federal agencies and with corporate America. What about our politicians themselves, though, right? Because they get elected and they get a security clearance. It's not, it's not like anybody's going to probably tell them no.
Right.
So how, how do you guys manage that?
Difficultly. So, and it's not just Congress, it's the White House, right? So if you work in the White House and you're on National Security Council, you're not getting polygraphed, right? You're going to get a security clearance because you asked for one and the president says you're getting one. And that also goes for, as you mentioned, members of the House and Senate. Now, fortunately, not everyone gets all the information, right? If you are in the Senate Select Committee Intelligence or House, or you're on HASC for DOD or SASC on the Senate side, you're going to get some pretty intelligent, you're going to House Foreign Affairs, you're going to get some pretty heavy stuff. But we try and the government, the intelligence community tries to do a pretty good job of bifurcating that information. So not everybody gets everything, right? So that's kind of the way we do the best job of it. But, listen, these politicians are elected. Some of them aren't even elected. Some of them are just given their jobs because someone left, right? So, you're going to go brief a senator because he or she was given the job by the governor. Like what? It's for a career intelligence professional or law enforcement, it's a difficult thing, but you're just going to have to trust the system. Obviously, we dealt with that in 16 and 20 on the election cycle pretty every day.
Yeah.
All right, one more question. Of our allies, which of our allies are the worst in terms of spying on us?
Well, so by saying that question, the worst, maybe you want to change which one's the best. We have some pretty amazing allies, and I can't say that we've officially ever caught the Brits or the Canadians, the Australians spying on us. We have caught the Israelis spying on us,
and the French, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They're just the French. Don't get me started on the French. They're good at what they do. You know, if you fly into Charles de Gaulle, you better not bring a telephone.
Economic warfare.
Yeah. So, but the Israelis, they do what they have to do, right? So when we're in the space race and you want technology, they do what they have to do, and they're an ally, and we can't do anything without them. They're our second best partner in the world. So I think it's called friendly fire, friendly spying. It is what it is. My argument with the Israelis is, if you just ask us, we'll give it to you.
Yeah.
You don't need to get caught spying and giving that stuff. But I think the Americans will always be best known for not only partnerships with our Five Eyes, but with our other friendly companies that are allies. And it can be the most innocuous country. But when we send our women and men around the world to partner, whether it be the Italians or Thailand, doesn't make a difference. We do amazing things. And everyone knows America is the big dog, and you better partner, and they want to partner, right? So even some of our frenemies were willing to partner, right? Mm-hmm. So I think now when you see what's going on in Syria, you'd be shocked at some of the things that the Syrians are doing to help and partner with us that was not even thinkable 3 years ago.
Bill, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about, and also tell people where they can go and find you and find the Evanina group?
Yeah, so you can get me online, bill@evaninagroup.com. Hit me up. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very, very popular on LinkedIn in terms of I'm on there a lot. I have a Twitter at Bill Evanina. I tweet a lot, especially on China and Putin. I do what I can out there. People are willing to get me there. They can. In terms of we could do this for 7 more hours, as you know. And I wish I was there and we could smoke some cigars.
Next time.
There's tons of good stories here. But I think I just want to leave with, for you and your loyal audience, just know that the women and men in uniform, whether it be law enforcement, the intelligence community, or DOD, work their asses off every day to protect America. So we all know who they are. You have family members and friends that do this. I would just ask your viewers this coming week coming up, take a moment, pat them on the back, say thanks for what you do, right? And then if you know someone who's maybe in the Middle East or in Asia and you don't know what exactly they're doing, send them a note. Say, hey, I don't know what you're doing over there, but thank you for what you're doing because my family appreciates it. I think we just, as Americans, the government's going through some rough times right now, the intelligence community as well. I just think we have to rally and support those awesome people who are around the world, even here in the U.S., who are protecting us every single day. Just take a moment, send them a note, pat them on the back, and say thanks. I think that's what I think would go a long way with giving them a little bit of fuel and emotion to keep doing what they do. That's a passion and a livelihood they've wanted to do as a dream. We just, as Americans, got to support them a little bit moving forward.
Help them fill up that white binder a little bit.
Help them fill up that white binder. And sometimes it's 3 or 4 little taps in the back saying, hey, could I buy your coffee today? Thanks for what you do. Hey, maybe it's a baseball coach or a baseball kid. Hey, I don't know what you do, but I know you do something really cool, whatever it is. Thank you for what you do, right? You see a woman or a man in a U.S. military uniform, whatever the service, walk up to them, shake their hand, say, hey, I'm Dave, I'm Bill. Thank you for what you do. If it could be procurement, doesn't make a difference. Acquisition, thanks for what you do. It goes a long way for those people, motivating them to get through that day.
Bill, thank you so much for this interview and telling some really unique stories from the depths of counterintelligence that most people don't get to hear.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
It's a very unique perspective, and I thank you for coming on here and doing this. We'll have some links down in the description for our listeners or viewers where they can find Bill and they can find the Evanina group. So thank you again for doing this. I hope you join us in studio next time, Bill.
I look forward to it. I'm going to probably be up there in August to look you up and bring up some cigars.
Outstanding. And we'll see all you guys next time. Thank you. Thanks.
Pleasure.
Hey guys, it's Jack. I just want to talk to you for a moment about how you can support the show if you've been watching it, enjoying it, but you'd like to get a little bit more involved and help us continue to do this. You can check out our Patreon. It is patreon.com/theteamhouse. And for $5 a month, you can get access to all of these episodes of The Team House ad-free. The same goes with our affiliated podcast, Eyes On, with Andy Milburn, Jason Lyons, Mick Mulroy. That one, you will also get all of those episodes ad-free. And you support the channel and the show, and we really appreciate it. The Patreon members are literally what has helped this company, this small business survive, especially during our early years. And you are what continues to help this thing going, even as we navigate the turbulent world of YouTube advertising. So we really appreciate all of you guys. There's going to be a link down in the description to that Patreon page. And there is also going to be a link to our new merch shop. So if you guys want to go and get some Team House merchandise, we got stickers and we also have patches. And I should mention, if you sign up for Patreon at $10 a month, we will mail you this patch as well. So we really appreciate that. But they're also for sale on the merch shop. And additionally, they got t-shirts up there, water bottles, a tote bag, coffee mugs, all that good stuff. So please go and check them out and support the show. We really appreciate it, guys. Thank you.